in the I zones, then we have 600 and then the NA. So we thought about just having, if you have two frontages, to allow up to 1,000 square feet as well, just to keep it consistent. And then another area too is the building, the wall area percentage that we allow. And so that would need to be modified as well, potentially. Now, the thought behind why the I zones are more restrictive than commercial is because you don't need to be drawing business in, and you don't have like the commercial-esque activity. Where fireworks sales are more commercial in nature, but we have to have them zoned I-1 just because of for safety purposes and, size requirements and everything like that. So what we thought is that we would potentially put a footnote in the I district, and then down here, where we have specific requirements outlined, that we would potentially put like the next letter would be K, and then we would say that fireworks use in the I-1 and I-2 zone shall adhere to the C3 zoning district sign requirements.
Or would it be smarter just to say any commercial use allowed in a C3 zone gets it? Why are we just singling out fireworks? Because we allow hotels and other things in the I zone that are commercial based that you would find in the C3.
Right.
Maybe it would be better. I mean, I hate writing rules for a single specific use.
Right.
I mean, so if we're thinking about modifying, and then what you could still do with it, we could still leave the 600 and the not applicable or the no additional, not even mess with that, and just turn around and say we leave our industrial sign codes the same as they were when they were brought in. Mm-hmm. The only difference would be is that if you have a commercial use that's found in a C3 zone that's in the I zone, they get to follow C3 standards, and that way, we're not bastardizing the I zone.
Yeah, I like that idea, because I thought that too, like when we're just being very specific for one industry or one use, that, and if it does make sense.
Because I don't know off the top of my head how many commercial, what I would call C3 type uses are in the I-1, but there are quite a few, I think.
Right.
And in the I-2, we don't really encourage much C3 commercial type uses in the I-2, I don't think, do we?
No.
So, and if we thought at some point in time, I can remember it was a long time ago when we came up with it. I don't remember the NA discussion, but I do remember the discussion of having lesser signage in the industrial zone. And so I'm not exactly sure why we would want to increase that, but if we have I would tie it to the use and not the zone.
I mean, if the argument there is, though, that it's not really necessary because you're not trying to draw in customers, wouldn't it just be self-regulating, whereas if they weren't getting value out of it, they're not going to build that much signage?
Well, I don't know.
I'm not sure why we need to stipulate less.
Mark would probably hope so. But
so if you follow it along the lines of what Todd is laying out there, would that still require changing some of the other square footage and stuff? Because frankly, I didn't quite follow it off. Number one, I can't see that far. Number two, there was nothing written on the.
Yeah.
So I don't know if I'm in favor or against or neutral on the previous changes, but if that's all going to stay the same by virtue of
putting in a footnote,
God has said, would that require you to change the chart then?
No, not necessarily. The only thing that the NA, I think that it's odd. Whatever, NA is fine. I mean, I just don't know, like for this situation, like if you do have a lot with two frontage, do we just drop the 16 down and say that it's the same?
It would be clearer.
I mean, to me, NA, I disagree. NA is not applicable
Right.
because maximum height is an NA and the maximum sign is NA, so it's not additional. It's not applicable. It's how I would read it, and then all you need to do is define what the hell NA says.
Well, and it should be, but see, I guess just when I guess that was the intent. That's just, like I said, was mentioned. That was the intent of it. But do we, if there are two frontages, do we even, can we say, do you want to put it at 800 or 1,000, but at least put a cap? Instead of, because there will be an I lot with, so basically they're saying 600 square feet. And that's just to limit signage. So the huge I lot, industrially zoned lots are not being blighted, basically, with just obnoxious signage, which they would be self-regulated, you would think.
I think, again, we've been having this conversation, we're saying we still are regulating an on and off premise signage. And so if we say in the industrial zone, I've got now 800 foot of signage, and I can start and we go away from the message of the sign,
Right.
just to the amount of square footage, we could start seeing, 300-foot billboards going on the side of a building in addition to what their on-premise signage, because we're not regulating message. If that's where we're eventually going, I think those numbers are excessive in the industrial zone if we're talking about combining, not differentiating between the type, what the message says. Which
So you think-
which is where we should be going in the long run.
So we should just leave the chart as is and just add the footnote.
That's my opinion.
Yeah, and I that's where we're going to, and I like your suggestion of leaving it open to any, if any any business that is commercial in nature, that's in the I-1 zone, would be able to adhere to the C3 sign requirements.
I'm not saying, I think rather than just pick one column or one cell within the chart, I think there needs to probably be a comprehensive look at the chart as a whole, as opposed to just say, okay, we're just going to look at the industrial. But how does that really mix up? I don't know off the top of my head where all the industrial zones are at in town. There are some industrial zones that butt up against residential development. I'm aware of that. So just to come out and say, well, let's just go to 1,000 on two frontages or 800 on a single frontage, I don't know where that would impact and how that would, without having some public input on that.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, so I think I'm fine with leaving the chart as is, and like we did just amend the sign code, so we did get community input on this and everything. So if we can, there was thought that went into it. So if we can try to leave it as much as possible, but then still be workable.
Just figure out what the heck NAs means. That's all you just need to add. What's NA?
The way the rest of the table is laid out, it's just two values, whether you have a single frontage or two frontages. So if you just carried the values down, if that's truly what it is, no additional, then it's consistent.
Right. And since we would be presumably amending this ordinance, we could just clean it up at that time, so there is no question. So it just...
It is confusing with other cases where we have NA in the...
Well, because NA clearly means not applicable.
Yeah.
So using the chart as it's written now, and when it says not additional, how is that applied, today? Before you change it, so
not additional, not allowed, not applicable. I can see, where it could mean differently depending on which cell you're looking at.
Yeah, I think.
Well, I think we can all be in agreement that we need to clarify what NA is supposed to mean.
Because otherwise, you could look at it too as, okay, so if you have two, then I guess the sky's the limit. Just kidding, but we don't want to.
Yeah,
So we'll maybe just clean that up and just drop those down and just have, so where it says NA here, we'll put 16, and here we'll put 600. If it's NA, it kind of means, I don't know.
So what is, I can't read that, on the bottom, okay, there you go. Scroll up just a bit if you would, please. Okay, so so maximum total square foot, single frontage.
It's 600.
Maximum total square foot for two lots, well.
Two fronts.
Two frontage, well, if you read across it, evidently it's trying to accommodate for two frontages, so it wouldn't necessarily drop down from 16, 16 and 16 wouldn't necessarily apply, or 600.
I think what they're saying, in my recollection, again, this is many, many years since this was originally put together, is that you get 16, I don't care how many frontages you have. Mm-hmm. It's total. I could have 4 frontages. I could have a through lot and on a corner or whatever, and I have 4 frontages. In a residential zone, I only get 16 square foot regardless. And same thing in the industrial zone, regardless how many frontages you have, 2 or more, whatever, I'm still only stuck with 600.
And yeah.
That's how I remember the chart being put together.
Well, and we still, like, even with like residential zones, there's still, like, for temporary signs, you can have additional for frontages and everything. So for each front, you get an additional sign. And then, we have the stipulations of 60 days within an election and all that too, where then you can have up to 6.
Okay, but please, if you could just do more, so that the 16 represents the maximum total square footage for a single frontage.
Yep.
And also, it's for anything though, but you only get 16 square foot of signage on a residentially zoned lot. That's a permanent sign, a building sign, or freestanding. Temporary signs don't fall underneath this chart.
I'm sorry, what signs?
Temporary signs don't fall underneath this chart. This is for permanent signs. Right. This is for freestanding or a wall or a building sign.
Which, like typically in, you normally even wouldn't have a sign.
And so I don't get a freestanding sign in the residential R1, R2, R3. That's not an institutional use. I don't.
Yeah.
I get 3 foot of building sign in a residential zone that I can put in a placard on my house, or the Cases live here, or whatever. Right.
Yeah. So we will leave the chart as is, and we'll just add a footnote that says that basically properties being used commercially.
I would just say C3 uses.
Okay.
If that's what we're talking about, C3
Yep.
uses in an I1 or I2 zone.
Okay.
And that's if you're looking for a clean way of doing it.
Yeah, that's good. Because that would take care of any of the C uses basically, and for what the intent of what we're trying to accomplish. That would make sense.
I wasn't around for, the original discussion on this, so Todd, if you could just enlighten me a little bit more again on the limitation for the industrial lots, because industrial lots are also the biggest lots that we have in the community, the largest setback lots that we have in the community. So regardless of, them needing to draw in commercial activity, I don't see the reason for limiting so drastically.
I think the recollection from the conversation 10 plus years ago was just that there really isn't a need for more signage. The more signage that you have in an area, there's more opportunities for clutter. The business parks that we have that are owned by the city and the development company have covenants on them already, and the amount of signage that they had. I think that was part of some of the direction that came into it.
It seems kind of weird to me that we're even, regulating it purely on frontages. You'd think it'd be more like lot size because, for clutter, you're talking density, right? Density of signage.
Could very well be. Yeah, I'm not married to this. I mean,
Yeah.
I think in the end we need to be migrating more to time, place, manner, which then just gives us the maximum number of signs, the maximum amount of square footage, how you use it, whether it's frontage or on a wall. That's up to you. I think that's where we need to be going, and if we do this correctly, this chart basically goes away over time.
Yeah, sure. Yeah.
And I think frontage-wise, I think for signage, because you want the frontage for signage. So if you have a really wide, if you say you'd have a really long lot, and then you could really clutter your front with your signage, because it'd still be meeting the minimum area requirement, but then it could just be, minimal, 100 foot, which is still large, but then they're just saying, if you have more frontage, then you get additional signage.
Well, that's what I think it'd be tied to an actual, amount, right? So whether it's square footage of the lot or lineage of the frontage, right?
Then you get into discussion too. I might have a large lot with multiple commercial uses within it. And,
Sure.
Like you take Shriver Square, for example.
Yeah.
And here, Blake, we do have the, 1 point, so for the I-1, for the maximum area of your sign, freestanding sign, then you go 1.33 square feet for each 2 linear feet of frontage, or 200 square feet, whichever is less. So then that way, then we do regulate it on the linear footage. Yeah, the linear feet, there we go. That's what I was looking for. So, any other discussion on that one? Otherwise, if you guys are comfortable with that, then You can see that in the near future too, just so we can keep these things rolling.
Yeah, I think that makes a lot of sense, and we can look at the other stuff down the road.
This is a bigger puzzle than
Yeah,
we're probably
absolutely.
going to take, and we're going to have to probably look at it. It's nice to take these one-offs because we have something in front of us, but in the end, I think it's one of those big tasks that need to be addressed over the next year or something too.
Yeah.
Yes.
I think it makes a lot of sense to treat the commercial as commercial, so I think that's pretty clear.
Right, because they're, usually I-1 is less restrictive except in the signage. So then if there's a commercially used property zoned I-1 and they're commercial in nature like that and would like to be able to draw in business with more signs or whatnot, then I think it's a good option for them to go about their business.
Good.
All right, we good on that one?
I think so.
Okay, so then the other discussion item I have is the rear transitional yards in the Gateway Overlay District discussion. And so let me get to that ordinance. And this also relates to a project that made us look a little deeper into the ordinance. And it kind of stems back to with us just passing the downtown overlay district as well. Like going through that, we put something on the books and we hope that it works well for 95% of the properties. But then once you really start looking at a project and seeing how it fits, that's when amendments come around. And that's the nice thing, that if you guys are on board with an amendment or whatever, but we can discuss it and see where everyone's at once I get there. Okay, so in the Gateway Overlay District, like the downtown overlay district, it's a higher aesthetic. So we want it to be, we want everything to be consistent and for it to look, aesthetically pleasing as the gateway to our community and a new commercial district where, new projects will be happening. So, but looking at this then, we have this transitional yard section. And so basically, you have your type of use and then your adjacent district. And then that depicts what your width is, your setbacks off of the rear and side yards. So, and that's green space. But within that green space, you can also have a detention pond. You can put your detention facility or your stormwater facility in that area. So it's not like it has to be a completely useless space, but it does have to be green. And that the intent, from my understanding, is that that's just, break up the pavement and then to, have just those distinguishing areas between properties. And then you have your areas where you can have, landscaping, just the green grass, trees, anything like that. There are higher standards for landscaping as well and where the trees are placed and the islands and whatnot. But the thing that struck me as a little odd was that, so you'll see here on 1 that it says, within any gateway overlay district, transitional yards will be required within side and rear yard setbacks on lots or parcels with commercial or industrial uses. So I get the side, but the rear is what I question, because so basically a property owner is losing 30 feet of, 30 by whatever for what the square footage would be of the property that they can use and build on. And if it's appropriate that we have a transitional yard in the rear when that's usually not seen.
But I think the intent here is that they're considered kind of a buffer between districts.
It's a buffer between uses. It's a buffer between districts. It allows for water to run off parking lots and be filtered as it gets, especially in this area where we know all the water is going to get down to Willow Creek eventually. And so I remember when this was put together, whether or not the width needs to be 10 feet or 20 feet, I won't comment on that because of the practical application. But my recollection, when the rules were put together, we did not want to see a standard C3 Highway 212 district where we could have pavement on top of pavement on top of pavement, or like on Highway 20 or 212. We wanted to have an area where there was going to be something distinguishable about this district, and that's why we laid the overlay on top of it. We wanted more grass, we wanted more trees, we wanted more separation. And so from my perspective, I think there needs to be a rear transition yard. It was the reason that was, now that we're actually trying to put rubber to the road and we're starting to see development out there, everybody knew going in from platting and layout and design and how it's being marketed what the rules are. And so I'm comfortable with having a transitional yard in the rear. It maybe doesn't need to be 10 feet, maybe it's 5 feet. I don't know what the answer is to that.
It doesn't change the buildable area of the lot from a standpoint of the actual physical building, because it's within the existing setback. It affects where they can put pavement.
Yeah, and parking.
And parking, yeah.
And so that's where you usually see, like in the commercial zones, you just have to have 5 foot setback from the property line for the parking. But that's what's nice for developers, is that then it's not, the setbacks for the buildable area are not wasted or not usable space, that they can still utilize it for their parking. And so that's really where, like, requiring 10 feet around the side, the rear, both sides and the rear, it really does cut a lot off of the property. And I get if you can strategically use that area for your detention pond, but in this situation, what we're going to run into in this overlay district is because it's all new development. So they're doing regional ponds. So they won't have, which is also nice, that they won't have individual stormwater facilities.
But it's not really about regional ponds, it's about the aesthetic look. It wasn't so much about stormwater drainage. It was about stormwater being cleaner, getting to places, but it's about the look. It's the aesthetic of the gateway. It's not about whether or not I've got a place to personally store water.
Yeah, I'm with you on the aesthetic thing, and I might I might be willing to go lower on that if you can try to get more trees in there somehow and build up that kind of aesthetic barrier between the districts that way, versus just having grass. The trees might actually be more appealing long term. And maybe there's a way that we could incorporate that in too, that if you got a solid buffer row of trees, that it's
right, maybe it is your 10 feet, but I can reduce it down to 5 if I'm planting trees or something like that.
Yeah, something along that line. Because that is the goal here, is to make an aesthetically appealing area for all uses, right?
But then I'm looking at it, and I get the aesthetics for sure, but I just want to see it from the development standpoint, where we hear the complaints is. So then you have 20 feet of grass then from each property, and like between parking lots, that's quite a bit of space.
They need places to store snow.
Yes.
Right.
But a lot of those people probably haul it anyway.
Save some money not hauling snow.
So obviously, and the side, when you're...
I think sometimes, it's a guide, and we're looking for a general aesthetic. Each individual developer is going to come in with a design. And if they can show something in the design that still meets the intent of the district, that gives you something easier. I don't want to say that you start variancing things. But then, as of right now, I have nothing to react to. I know in my mind there's a grass strip around that's going to be adequate to buffer between the uses. I can visualize that, but if somebody can come in with a design that's going to be something a little bit different than that, but would like to reduce that 10 feet to a 5 feet, but I'm going to do something to offset that, maybe that would suffice too. But again, I know the intent of the policy was to have a separation, a green area, more aesthetically pleasing than the standard C3 zoning district.
How many questions or complaints or comments have you had from developers revolving around this?
Well, there hasn't been too much development out there yet. I imagine that it will be taking off, just with inquiries and everything. And to full disclosure, there will be a public notice in the paper, and I don't know as far as for upcoming requests that you'll see that you will be approached with this situation. So I wanted to have an open discussion on your actual thoughts and the intent, so that you could try to, so that we would know what we want anyway. And then so if we agree, we'd come back with an ordinance amendment, because if it's okay, then we'll get it changed everybody.
I'll say it one last time. I know the intent is to have some grass out there. How much grass, I'm not gonna say what that number is. But again, until somebody comes and brings us something so we can visualize what that's gonna look like, it's gonna make it, it's a little bit, we're shooting in the dark right now when we came up with the 10 feet. We just thought that sounds like a normal number. And then we thought, well, but maybe somebody could do something with 7 feet, and they're gonna do some trees or some shrubbery or whatever. And it looks great.
And we probably went into this thinking that a lot of them are going to take advantage of the stormwater in that area, and if they're not, if they're doing a different solution, then yeah, we can look at other scenarios. You don't have a big swale in there where the stormwater is going to some level land and plant some trees on there. I don't think we go far enough in requiring trees in our developments. Honestly, as a community, we should have more trees. So I would definitely be amenable to that.
I do know the intent is not to run pavement onto pavement onto pavement.
Exactly. Yeah.
Right. No concrete jungles. Okay, so I think that's good discussion for that topic right now, and then we'll be seeing it in the near future.
Cool.
So yeah, that's all I have for new business.
Any old business?
I just have a question. I sent an email to you and to Blake a few weeks ago about this lake resort thing.
Yes.
Do we have anything like that, or is that one of the things that's in the works with the whole master plan that we've talked about 50 times? And
Well, and so we will be adopting the Lake and Pesca Master Plan here soon. We're doing a couple amendments.
Portions of the Lake Compesca Master Plan. We have to dovetail that into the other land use plan that we're doing, and there are some inconsistencies between the two documents. So
Okay.
I think we're going to be needing to review that as a planning commission between what was presented and what also has been worked on for the last several years. So
Right,
there are inconsistencies, so we're going to have to figure out what's the direction.
And the zoning map that was offered in the Lake and Pesca Master Plan will not trump the comprehensive land use plan, because that's the consultant's recommendations.
Right.
So, but then what we adopt in our land use plan will still be what we use when in making decisions. But as far as the resorts go, that, and I did have that on here as discussion because we are getting close. I just didn't have all the internal discussions that I wanted to before I have it polished enough to bring to you guys. So we can have.
We bring some of the discussion items that we had earlier in the year on our resorts discussion as part of that.
Yeah.
Your report.
Yep. Yeah, so anybody that was a part of all of those meetings at 7 a.m. for the resorts, it did not, get swept under the rug. We will be using that information and then bringing that forward, finally. But, we kind of were waiting for the Lake and Pesca Master Plan, not knowing what recommendations would be provided with that. So.
Is that something Luke is working on to identify those differences?
Well, Luke and I were just talking about this the other day. We have been in general agreement what the land use plan is in this last map making thing. I think policy wise, we went through it from a planning commission, so we know what we have. If you've seen the Lake Compesca Master Plan, there are a lot of commonalities because they took a lot of the information that Luke had been working on and what we generally improved. There are some things that are some substantive differences between the two, and I think that's where we're going to have to provide direction to Mr. Mueller on what we want to incorporate, what we don't want to incorporate. We don't have to adopt the master, because there's portions of the Lake Compesca Master Plan that has nothing to do with land use. And so, it's like, we can adopt documents as referenced or portions of those documents. But we do need to make sure that whatever it is, that we have a consistent message between the two documents. And I think that's something, I was just talking to the consultant yesterday in Aberdeen, and he said that they are working through the last changes, and once that, it'll have to come to us as the planning commission, and then staff and Mr. Muller are gonna have to figure out, okay, this is, where's it differ, and then bring that back to us, and then we're gonna have to provide direction on that final.
And we have been having internal
Yeah.
communication between the consultant and then just staff, and what is existing currently, and then, you know, also, but taking into account their professional opinion.
What kind of time frame do you think we're looking at to see some draft information?
For
I guess both from an ordinance standpoint and from a consolidation of the master plan.
My understanding that the land use plan, Luke has said, I mean, is very close to being done as far as the maps and the notes that we've had over the discussions over the last year. And I think where Luke is at is we're holding on to that. I think we want to see the Compethska, and I think then the discussion would be between Luke and staff to come back with a recommendation to the planning commission, and then from there we're going to have to, you know, separate the wheat from the chaff and figure out which path we think is the most appropriate as a recommendation to the city council.
But yeah, I think that hopefully, and you know, the time is flying, already in the middle of October, but I mean, if we could wrap this all up by the end of the year.
I would like to hopefully see us going to public hearing in January on the land use plans, so that they do get adopted, so that if we get started with public hearings in January, it's still February, it's April before they're all in place.
Which is good, because then development and construction is going to start back
Right.
up. So then,
Exactly, yeah.
Let's get into the next building session.
yeah.
That's the goal, and I know we'd like to get that off, from a.
So in order for that
Oh,
to
yeah, you
happen
guys
in
will be ready for-
January, we need to be kind of wrapping that stuff up in December internally and drafting everything.
Well, and I think if we get the master plan from the Lake Compethska, from the consultant, and Luke in our office with the planning district, I'm trying to stay out of that just because of my position here on the board, is that Luke will then work with city staff to come back and say, okay, this is what they said, this is what we've already talked about and said, what's different. We need to come back and say, which path are you picking, planning commission?
Yeah, because it'll be basically at that point, two of our consultants giving us our recommendations.
And then we're gonna have to choose.
To adopt, yeah. So like same with, like, before the next construction season this spring, I definitely would like to get the lake commercial district approved and in the books, and then look into resorts, and that's the main thing of how to regulate existing residential properties and potentially adding commercial, which lots to go into there, and then also a mixed use district.
You know, and the one thing, since we're talking about wish lists, I would really think that maybe in December-ish time or shortly after the first of the year, I think it would be nice just to have the planning commission have a separate planning meeting amongst ourselves so we can sit down with staff. Staff could give us a direction of things that they think is important. The planning commission could come up with some ideas, and then we prioritize what needs to be done right away, what we would like to get done next year, and then maybe what's on that 18th to 2-year window. So it helps you
Yeah.
in your workflow, and also helps, you know,
And
the planning
we-
I
commission.
agree.
And we did that last year and went through, you know, the different items that we've discussed, and the list always is growing. So it is good to look at that again and then establish priorities. So yeah, basically, if everyone's thinking about their Christmas list,
Yeah.
Well, that's what I was thinking. I was just thinking it'd be nice. I think it'd be helpful from a staff perspective that you know where we're thinking we'd like to go, and then you need to tell us where we need to go from the perspective of, hey, we don't have the right tools in the toolbox to do some of these things. Then it's just it's a balancing act between the two.
And I think, so definitely keep that on your radars, jot down what is valuable to you. And I think, just so for open meeting purposes and everybody can be involved, we would have it as a discussion item, maybe in November, which is in 2 meetings.
There's nothing saying that we can't have a little planning retreat of our own. It can be open to the public, but we could get together.
Right, we just notice it. And
Yeah, we get together over lunch or for a couple hours and just, have somebody come in and facilitate.
I mean, it's like any other working session that we've done.
Yeah. Yeah, I think that'd be good. And definitely.
And the city council as well. I mean, I think we would like to hear where the city council is looking at, from some of the things that the council members and the mayor, from a direction where they think, well, why does this happen, or why doesn't this happen, or what maybe we need something for this, that, or the other thing.
Definitely. And it could even be, and I think that would be really good to have, because it could spark things that, somebody might question, like why that's something we don't have in the books or whatever. And the list could get really long. I mean, we could have job security.
And we're not, I don't want to create work for work's sake, but we all have an idea that, okay, this needs to be fixed. And then we can say, well, how heavy a lift is it? And, let's get the low-hanging fruit, but let's get those. I mean, there are some large monsters in the cages that we do need to address, too. But you're doing a great job.
Yeah.
Thanks.
Agreed.
You guys are too. All right.
Any other old business? Need for executive session?
Nope.
Take a motion to adjourn. Motion by Stein. Second by Kays. All in favor? Opposed? We're adjourned.
Thanks, everyone.